It's not been on my property tax bill yet, and I think probably this year it might.
The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here, along with a familiar face, I think, to most viewers. Mark Rohloff, the Oshkosh City Manager, is here. Thanks for coming. We appreciate it.
Glad to be here, Cheryl.
We're going to talk about all kinds of stuff tonight.
Good,
We're going to talk about recycling primarily, because that's going to be kicking off fairly soon. The single stream recycling and the new recycling bins and all of that everybody's so elated over. So
it's a good topic.
So we're going to talk about that, get some good information out to folks, and then, whatever time is left, we'll talk about some other stuff. So,
sure.
The city was really great, Mark, about putting together this question and answer thing. And is this on your website too?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, what we try to do is we get questions maybe we didn't anticipate, we add a few more so that you're getting the Q&A plus.
Okay.
If you come up with a great question, we'll add it and get the answer in there so that everybody has a better idea.
I may have a couple for you.
You might.
But in case nobody, because, no matter how much this has been talked about, there are still, you would not, well, maybe you would believe the number of people out there who still don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
So we thought it would be a good idea for you to come on and talk about it.
So far what we've been trying to do is keep it just the Q&A to the website, but as we get close to the time of delivering the bins, it'll be about a week before we'll start collecting. Then we'll really get through the instructions, because we're concerned that if we do it too early, people take the instructions and cast it aside.
Yep.
We'll try to strike while the iron's hot, so to speak, and see how that goes.
Yeah. When are the bins going to be delivered?
We don't have the exact date set, but we're looking about middle of September.
Okay.
What we want to do is we're still waiting on delivery of the trucks themselves. Okay. The bins are pretty much ready that they could be delivered by the vendor, but we don't have them in our possession yet. We have to get a staging area and to get them all set, but we got to wait for the truck first. And so we want the truck arrival to coincide with the bin arrival, and then we'll start delivering the bins with the instructions. You'll have a set of instructions tucked inside the bin, so don't start throwing the stuff in right away. Look inside the bin and grab your instruction first.
All right, good. Well, so I thought we could just start by going right down this list. You guys have already put some questions together, so we'll go right down the list, and then I've got some other ones too. So, it is single stream recycling, and, give us the layman's version, the quick Reader's Digest version of what single stream recycling is.
What single stream recycling involves is all of your recyclables that you currently have separated, be it paper, cardboard, cans, bottles, glass. All of the recyclables will now be put into a single bin, and an automated arm will come and pick up the bin that we will deliver to you and dump it into the truck and go away. Back at the recycling facility it's being constructed at the Outagamie County landfill, they will separate the recyclables into their proper place and take it from there. The reason it's being done is the statistics appear to show that more people recycle more if it's more convenient to them. And single stream recycling, the studies show, increase it. I was a bit skeptical, to be honest with you, myself at first, but the statistics show that it increases it because it simplifies it. And what we'll do is, instead of recycling half of your recyclables every week, every 2 weeks you'll be on a recycling schedule. We'll issue a whole new recycling schedule for you, and every other week everything will be taken out. So over the course of 2 weeks, if you got paper, throw it in. If you got cans, bottles, just throw it into the bin. It can be, as it says, single stream, all commingled now, and just put it out on the curb, and we'll take it away.
Okay, good. next question is, how much is this program going to cost?
Well, the cost of the bin, I believe, is going to be about $46. The council decided that the fairest thing to do was to put it as a single one-time special charge on your tax bill. We are also going to accept prepayments if people don't want it on their tax bill, but a single payment. The program is still funded largely through property tax dollars. We do get reimbursed for about a little more than about 40% of our costs are covered through recycling grants from the state, but the remainder comes from the general property tax dollars. We are looking at having reduced costs because with the automated system it'll be cheaper to operate. That we're very much looking forward to with the automated system, and we're hoping people will like it. And from what I've talked to other municipalities, it works very well, and after getting a little used to, which is good why you're asking these questions, because we got to get people used to it.
Well, that's just it. I mean, many years ago, there was no such thing as recycling. You just threw everything out in the trash, and then we all had to learn how to recycle. And, you got one trash can for one thing and another trash can for something else, and you got blue bag week and you got cardboard week, and now we've got to learn a new system again. And so
I think it's going to be more simplified. I think the untraining part about separating the recyclables, that I think is going to be a little difficult because it just makes sense to keep it separated. That's my own personal opinion. But everybody, if they realize that this bin will hold everything, and I've used bins for years before I moved to Oshkosh, and I never filled up as much as a 96-gallon bin, so there'll be plenty of it. But when you add cardboard and things like that, it'll add up after a while because everything has to go inside your bin. And I've always kept the cardboard separated, but I think it'll work out okay. The real thing is training everybody that it'll be every other week for the whole thing. And that's why we need to get the schedule out. So you'll get a new schedule that says this week will be your recycling week, and we'll alternate it. So we'll be able to cover half the city one week and half the city the next week.
Okay. It's going to be a nightmare for you guys, I'm sure, getting all this put together and everything. But once it's together and once people start kind of figuring out what to do, and they've retrained their brains a little bit, it'll probably go smoother than what you might think. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road initially.
There'll be bumps in the road, but I think that's part of our job, and I appreciate you bringing this subject up. It's just once everybody gets trained, I think it'll be okay. But there'll be some angst as people go through the process, and we certainly want to try to make it as easy as possible. I had somebody in the City Hall lobby a couple months ago when we first put the bins out, and they didn't realize that there were wheels on it. And I think when you take a look at a 96-gallon cart, which is it's 3.5 feet tall, it looks really intimidating. But then I took an elderly person, and it was sort of like sampling a pair of shoes. Go walk down the hall and come back. And they walked with the cart. They go, oh, this is easier than I thought. They thought that there were no wheels and they were going to have to drag the poor thing. So we got to get over those misconceptions and misinformation that get in people's heads, and we'll deal with them a step at a time. But we'll do okay.
You mentioned, they are big. They are big, and I mean, even the smallest of the two is kind of big and somewhat awkward in shape. And we're going to get more into the specifics of all this, but everything is thrown into the bin loose. Nothing can be in blue bags. Nothing can be bagged up. These are all recyclables, and everything gets tossed in loose. So this is going to get dirty after a while. So if you're hosing this out to clean it, is there like a little plug on the bottom, kind of like in a boat, where you unplug it so that it drains out? Because how is someone, especially if they're frail or elderly, how are they going to tip this thing over to get the water out?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer. I'll put one of those things in, how to clean it. Maybe they add that to our questions. I'm not aware if there's a plug at the bottom or not. I'm sure any of our folks in Public Works would probably know the answer right off the top of their head. I could also run out in the hallway and check and see if there is one. But that's a good question, and to the degree that some people tipping it over totally upside down might be the best approach, but for somebody elderly that may not be the best approach. I'll add it to my list of questions.
Well, maybe I've come up with something. If there's no
You know-
plug on it, maybe, hey, maybe I
Yeah.
should patent this.
Sure, exactly.
Before it gets out in the public too much. Okay, so you said sometime mid-September, probably these bins are going to be delivered, and they're going to be delivered right to someone's home, right?
They're going to
Do
be
they need
put
to be home?
No, they're going to be put out just like it would be at the end of the day with when you come home and your recycling bin will be there after you leave it out the day. We're going to put it right there in your driveway apron. For those folks, we'll try to get the word out that we're going to be delivering them that week, so there's no surprise. So if you're not home, make sure your neighbor knows so at least they can put it in a place for you that's convenient. But it's no different than if you were leaving your garbage can out on garbage day and you weren't going to be home. You want to make sure somebody brings your can in for you.
Sure.
It'll be the same thing, but you'll find it at the end of your driveway with the instructions. We got a little radio ID in there, so we know that that's your bin, and we'll keep a log of that. So if there's any confusion, we can always scan it and say, no, this belongs to Cheryl or this belongs to Mark.
Yeah, and they're going to be, a number's going to be stamped across the front too, right?
Yeah, I believe there's going
So-
to be some serial number, but we also slipped in the little radio ID, so we'll have it computerized, so
Sure.
we could scan it and know exactly that it's your bin.
Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit more in depth shortly. Estimated size of the carts. Do you know this offhand, or you
No,
want me
I'll
get
have
the
to
cheat
cheat.
sheet?
Yeah,
There you
go right ahead. Yeah. Well, that was a big issue. The height of the 96 gallon I said was about 3.5 feet. It's 43 1/4 inches, so slightly over 3.5 feet. The 64 gallon isn't much smaller in terms of height. It's only a couple inches, or actually 1.5 inches, 41.75, but it's a little narrower. And there were a lot of people that asked to have the smaller bin because they didn't think they would recycle as much. If that's the case, some people were given the opportunity to get the smaller bin. Some people missed that deadline. There was a little bit of concern over that. But what we've been told by other communities is that people don't realize how much they can recycle once they're given an easier process. And this is an easier process. You just throw it in. And what we found is that people will call us and say, can I have a bigger bin? And they change their mind. And we're going to try to accommodate those requests. So the people who felt that they wanted the smaller bin, if they still feel that after a couple months, the experience is that you get a lot of extra 64-gallon bins because people realize that they can recycle a lot more than they thought.
Okay, all right. So,
Okay, yeah, the length of the bin for the 96-gallon bin is 35 1/4 inches. The width is 29.75. That length is really more like the depth. So, it's about 3 feet by 2.5, or 3 feet by 2.5 feet by 3.5 feet high. It's pretty boxy. It can fit, you can keep it outside. That's certainly okay. If you have room in your garage, you can put it in there too. But it's meant to withstand the elements. We picked a pretty durable plastic. There were some that were cheaper, but they were cheap, and that wasn't what we wanted to do. We want these things to have a good life of 10, 15 years or more. And we feel that the more durable ones would hold up better. So you can keep them outside. That won't be a problem.
and they have a lid on them so that, like bees and rodents can't get in there?
Yeah, they close very easily, and there's not a lock on it, but they stay shut pretty easily.
Okay.
They don't get picked up by the wind or anything like that. They're pretty sturdy, so they're balanced and they stay right there on the ground. They don't get blown over easily.
Okay. Well, talking about where to keep it, I'm going to take this back now.
Go right ahead.
Talking about where to keep it, I'm assuming that the same city ordinance still applies, that it can't be sitting out where it can be seen from driving down the street. It needs to be kept, if not in your garage, then behind your house or something like that.
Right, and if you take a look at a standard garbage can, the round ones, they're about a little over 2 feet in diameter. So you're really not taking up that much more room. If it's outside, you're going to be able to put it in the same place as you do now.
And the other thing too, Mark, is again, this is a bin only for recyclables. There's still going to be a weekly garbage pickup for all your other stuff that's non-recyclable.
Garbage isn't changed one iota, and we don't want people to confuse that because some cities have done refuse automation first. we're not doing refuse automation, we're just doing recycling, really because of the opportunity that the single stream presented itself with. So it was like, well, we can take care of both things at the same time.
Yeah.
But refuse, please don't put refuse in there. It really will screw up the system, and technically it's illegal, and we don't want to not take your recycling. We want to take your recycling, so
Sure.
please leave your garbage in your garbage cans, in your bags, and we'll continue to pick those up.
So bags for garbage are still fine, just for not for recyclables.
Exactly, yeah.
And that may be one of the hardest things that I'm thinking offhand people might have difficulty with. You know.
Yeah, it may be a little tough, and I'm hoping that through shows like this and through other things that we'll be doing, as well as public information in general, word of mouth. You really rely on word of mouth with that, but hopefully people will understand that.
Sure. Well, I know that a lot of people talked about, well, gosh, we can just go to the store and buy these bins, and not these bins. You can't, right?
No, you cannot. They have to be the. We picked a color of blue, and they have to be that bin. The bins that you get at the store may not have the area where you can grip it and pick it up. And also, I've taken a look at some of the bins that you can get at a home improvement store. I don't want to do any commercial names.
Right.
They're frankly just not as durable. And you may be able to get it at a lesser price, but the quality won't be there. It won't hold up. You must use our designated recycling cart for your recyclables.
Okay. All right. Do I have to set the recycling cart out even if I don't have much in it? A friend of mine, he just does not do much recycling. He's a very simple man. He doesn't buy that much stuff that's recyclable or anything. And he said, I may have a couple things a year to put out, or a couple things a month maybe. But he said, I just don't. He's thinking he might use his to store like garden tools in and things. So, but I mean, what if you are in a situation like that? You live by yourself. You really don't have much in the way of recycling. You eat out a lot or whatever.
Yeah, there's absolutely no requirement that you put it out every 2 weeks. I think I would encourage everybody, if it's not full and you don't feel like it, don't put it out. If you want to wait until it's full, that's okay. And for people who are living by themselves or elderly or a combination thereof, you may not need it quite as often.
Right.
But I got 4 kids. I go through 5-6 gallons of milk a week. I got 10 to 12 jugs I'm putting in there just at the start, and then you add pop cans and things like that. Things will add up after a while. But if you don't feel like putting it out, you don't need to put it out. That's not part of it. We don't want you to put them in the garbage either. Right. But certainly you're under no obligation to put it out every 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, speaking of garbage, I'm going to go off of this sheet for a little bit, and then we'll get back to it. The way it was before, like tin cans that say canned vegetables come in, you could recycle that if you rinsed it out after you took the vegetables out, and I think you had to peel the label off too, if I'm not mistaken. But has any of that changed, or is can you just throw it in there with the label on?
No, we encourage people to take the labels off as much as possible.
So that still would screw things up.
Yeah, because that still has to get processed that way,
Right, okay.
And I always have to remind myself too to take the labels off, because it just makes it easier for the processing plant to do that, because otherwise they have to figure out a way to take it off. So take those things off, take the jug, the caps off the milk jugs, do all the things that you've been doing in the past, and we'll keep encouraging and educating everybody that they should continue to do those things.
Okay. But if they're not going to even rinse the can out, should they just continue throwing it in the garbage?
Well, they should rinse the can. Spend a little time, rinse it out, because we really don't want the cans in the refuse. We want to try to recycle as much as possible.
Okay.
So please, rinse and follow all those instructions you've always been using, and try to increase the amount of recycling. It's better for all of us, because the more you recycle, the less it gets diverted to the landfill.
Mm-hmm. I
know a lot of people say, well, you don't get as much for aluminum as you used to. And that's very true, but that doesn't mean that there isn't still a need for this aluminum. Markets are getting created constantly for the use of plastic. Not all things, not all plastic things are recyclable. Yogurt cups aren't recyclable for whatever reason. Until those times come, you can throw those away. But if you've got a tin can or aluminum can, rinse it out, give it a little swirl, dump it out, and recycle it. And please do it as much as possible because it helps preserve a very valuable resource of landfill space. It's great that the 3 counties, Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago, are working together on this. And the best way we can preserve a very limited resource, which is our land, is by keeping as much out of that landfill as possible.
Yep. Well, no, there's still places, I think. I know there's like automated machines around town. We don't, for example, recycle in our trash or in a weekly recycling thing with the city any aluminum cans. We put them in bags and we take them all to...
Same here.
We used to take them to one place and now they've discontinued it. So I don't know. We've got a whole bunch that we're compiling right now.
We still collect them ourselves.
We may have to take them to an automated machine somewhere. But so, I mean, people shouldn't feel like they have to, put them in the bin if they have other, there's a lot of people who compost and things like that. I mean, don't stop doing some of those recycling things if you're doing them just because this is changing.
Please keep doing it. Oh, absolutely. I try to teach my kids a lesson. And hey, look, if you collect these aluminum cans, you can go out there and turn them in and get some money. And my kids still do it. And if you're doing that type of stuff, encourage you. And there's a lot of other things you can do. I mean, the whole reduce, reuse, recycle, it's not all about recycling. Continue to compost and do those things. Try to reuse bags that you get at the store for other purposes. Continue to find ways to recycle other products. Waste oil, don't put it in the garbage. We've got a waste oil recycling.
And don't dump it down the city
and please,
sewers.
Absolutely not. Yeah, thank you for mentioning that.
Well, I'm sure that there's someone out there who's done it.
I think people don't realize. I think people still think when you pour oil down a stormwater drain that it gets treated somewhere. Not true. It goes into our lakes and streams, and that's another topic for another day.
Well, but you brought up about that you can take it over to the city garage, and that is true. And I mean, that place is so easy to use. I mean, there's someone there. The gates are open until I think 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
On weeknights, and I'm not sure what their hours are on the weekend, but it's just very handy. You can go over there. There's a guy sitting there. He just jots down your permit number. And, you drop off what you need to drop off, whether it's brush or leaves or, motor oil, what have you.
Yeah, that's something that, again, because of the limited availability of landfill space, just because we say, our landfill's good for 30 years, well, that's only 30 years. I mean, who's going to take care of the garbage for the next generation? Right. If we can hold it off, it's much better for everybody.
Sure. Okay, so let's flip over to the second page here. Well, we talked about this, bagging the recyclables. No, throw them in there loose.
Yeah, and the bags, I know some people feel that's very convenient, but you got to do something with those bags. Yeah. Those bags are not recyclable. What happens is they have somebody tear them open right now, and then it's like, well, what do I do with this plastic? It goes to the landfill. So it kind of defeats the purpose of the whole program. So that was one of the reasons that we decided to go with that. In fact, the landfill was eventually going to have to prohibit blue bags. In Outagamie and Brown County, they've already done that. So Winnebago was lagging behind, and part of that was because it's costly to use the bags. It's costly for the residents as well as costly for us to process them.
Sure. And one of the other questions on your list is, what if my bin is full? Then can I put the other stuff in a bag? And the answer again is no.
No. But that's when you talk to the little old lady who doesn't use it every week. And all kidding aside, that's something you can do. Alternatively, you may need to keep it inside for another couple weeks. That's not exactly what you want to do. You can always drop it off at the county landfill. They will still accept excess recyclables, for lack of a better term. Please don't throw it in the garbage. Talk to your neighbor and say, hey, I got a few extra things. Can I throw them in there? We really do need to keep working together on that, because when you have a lot of boxes, if you bought a new appliance, and those boxes are huge. And if you just happen to be getting into recycling and it just isn't going to pull it off, you are going to need to break it down or cut it up and fit it in there. But I would encourage you to talk to your neighbors, or as a last resort, just take it over to the landfill yourself.
Yeah. Now, do they charge at the landfill, Mark, for things like that?
I believe that they don't charge for the recycling, but I could be wrong. I don't want to get quoted on that. I've never had to do it, so I'm not sure. But again, I wouldn't use that as a reason to discourage you from doing it. It's just because the other alternative is just cut it up and wait till the next biweekly pickup.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Will I need to participate in single-stream recycling if I rent?
The answer is yes. That's a state mandate. It's not something that Oshkosh has just done unilaterally. By state law, we are required to do recycling, and that's the reason that everybody gets a bin, because the only way we can ensure that somebody has the ability to recycle is if they have a bin. That's been a little bit of a contentious issue with folks who live in duplexes or rental facilities. That's been a tough one for us to wrestle with. But as we've talked to the state and we've talked to other communities that have done this, we really need to make sure that we provide a bin to each legal resident so that they have the capability, because one day you and your neighbor may get along great and say, hey, we can share a bin, we don't need to do this. But neighbors change, neighbors change, whether they physically change or emotionally change, and we need to ensure that you have the capability at your residence to recycle by yourself. If you don't want to put both bins out and you want to use one to put your garden supplies in, that's totally up to you. And if you can work with a neighbor, but if that relationship doesn't maintain itself, we still have to know that you have the capability of continuing to do it yourself.
Sure. Now, you mentioned, or one of us did before, about people who are a little bit more feeble and that type of thing. If someone has some kind of mobility issue, they are handicapped in some way, they're just elderly and just simply can't, even though it's on wheels, take this bin to the curb each week, what provisions are being made for them, Mark?
Council heard that a great deal from the residents, and they asked us to work out a program, and we're going to ask people to contact us, and it's on the information sheet. Contact us if you meet certain qualifications, and we just want to make sure that it's legitimate reason and everything. And if you qualify, we will certainly make accommodations for you if it appears to be too much. And there are some people who, while they're okay enough to stay in their home, this might be a bit of a burden. Contact us. Other communities have done it with some good success. But actually, give it a try and see if it's something. If you just think that it may not work because you're a little apprehensive about it, give it a try. I think you'll see that it's a lot easier. The example I used earlier when I had somebody in the hallway at City Hall, they were just amazed at how easy it was. If you think it's a problem, give it a shot. But if you know, based on your own frailties, that you can't do it, please contact us, and we'll work with you to make the necessary arrangements.
How strict is the city, Mark, on, because I know maybe it was in here, maybe I read it somewhere else, in situations like that, you're asking for a doctor's note or something saying that this is almost an impossibility for someone to do. Are you guys real stringent on that?
Well, my guess is if somebody is so frail that they can't do it, that they're probably seeing their doctor on a pretty regular basis, and doctors know when their patients are that way. And if a doctor provides a note, we're not going to question it. Okay. We can't sit there and say, well, we want a second medical opinion or something.
But I mean, they have to provide a doctor's note.
I believe they do. Okay. But my guess is if they're in that situation, they've got a pretty good relationship with their doctor, because they're visiting them a lot more than I would be.
Let's see, boy, some of the stuff we've covered. If someone moves, and I want to approach this from a couple different standpoints, if they move within the city, they can, city proper, where they're being serviced by City of Oshkosh refuse, trucks. If they live in the city and they move, they can take their bin with them. But if they leave the city, it's not going to be good anywhere else, so there's no point in taking it. Now, you mentioned before about, you know, the numbers on the front and the little radio frequency ID chip in there, the microchip. Okay, so I live in Oshkosh. I'm going to move from one place to another. I want to take my bin, but I've got a number on the front and I've got a microchip inside buried that identifies bin ABC with property 102. How does that work?
Well, first thing, if you're moving in the city, check and see if the bin is at the new place. The bin belongs to you. Once we deliver it to your home, it is yours. So if you move, you have every right to take it with you. We'd ask that you just give us a call. Say, you know, I live at this address, I'm moving to another address, and I'm taking my bin with me, so that we can say, okay, well, now we know that you've moved it. And similarly, if you're just moving and you say, hey, there's a bin at the new place, I'll just leave my bin at the old place, you can do that. If you want to hoard 2 bins, we're only going to collect on 1, but if you want to take it with you for your garden rakes, that's up to you. But and then the new person coming in, if you go into your new home and you don't see a bin, you will need to purchase a bin from the city, and we'll deliver it to you and arrange to get it for you. But if you want to take it with you to your new residence, you're quite okay doing that.
How do you change the microchip then, or the number on the front?
If you
or do you just put it in your records?
If you give us a call, we'll just say, okay, we know that address, and we know what radio ID number is with it, and we'll just change the address and take care of it that way.
Okay, all right. All right, excellent. And again, if they move out of the city, they're not going to be able to use it somewhere, so they may as well leave it behind. Conversely, if they're moving into the city, you know, from one of the surrounding towns or whatever, or another municipality, and they may have their own bin there, that's not going to work here either.
No, you have to have one of the city's bins.
Okay.
And so hopefully, you know, my advice is, you know, leave it. But it is yours, but you may as well just leave it at your residence if you leave. But it's your bin. You can do whatever you want with it.
Okay. All right. Now, these little microchips, let's talk about those, because there's all kinds of talk about what that's for. Why is there a microchip with this radio frequency thing embedded in the bin?
Well, I think Public Works knows that there's different capabilities, but it really is to just identify that it's registered to this residence, so that if there's some mix-up or anything, we can adjudicate it that way. Say, okay, we can do that. It does have the capability, but we're not purchasing all the software. I think it has some capability of recognizing if we needed to later on determine if people are recycling, but we aren't getting that capability. It's
Okay.
just, I'm sure the technology will improve.
You see that coming at some point?
I don't know. I'm pretty optimistic that it's going to be very successful. I don't know if we're going to necessarily need that type of information.
See, I think that would be almost a waste of taxpayer money to do that, because, you know, you do have people. You do it, I do it, we take our cans somewhere else, people compost. You know, we do find other ways of recycling, and just because there's not something being put out in a bin, you know, that doesn't mean they're not recycling. So
Right.
I think that software would be a waste of money.
Yeah, and we didn't bother.
It almost sounds like, you know, Gestapo tactics.
Yeah,
in
and that's
some respect.
and you want to try. This is a very positive thing, and we want
Yeah.
to keep it positive. You know, oftentimes, if I mean, we already have the law that says you must recycle,
Right.
and there are a few people that don't realize that. And the more we can encourage people to do it, it's much better through public education, and we'll just do it that way. And I just don't see the need for it either.
Okay, all right, excellent. So I want to talk about some of these other things then. You know, there's parking allowed on so many city streets, especially in areas of schools. You know, there's a lot of people who park on city streets in front of schools. There's just not enough space in the parking lots. And yet, you know, the trucks have to be able to access these bins. How will that work on a given street's recycling day when the truck is coming down the street? If there's vehicles parked there, and it would be a nightmare to try and get people to not park there for a day.
Oh, the
so
parking's got to
stay. How is this going to work?
Well, we built into our specs for the trucks themselves that they have a 10-foot arm plus, so we can reach actually across a vehicle if necessary. If it was that difficult and we couldn't get it at all, then the guy would have to jump out and get it in the right place.
Okay.
But we're going to give instructions on where to leave it exactly. People aren't supposed to be right on the driveway apron. They're supposed to be away from the driveway apron when they park.
Right.
But it has a really long arm that can literally reach across the hood of a car and pick up a bin and carry it over and tip it, and it won't.
Hopefully nothing falls on the car.
Hopefully, well, the idea is that it doesn't tip until it's overhead
Up, yeah.
over the truck. So that'll take a little maneuvering, but we purposely built our specs so that we had that capability, because with parking being at a premium through in many areas of the city, we knew that problem was going to present itself.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I think you had mentioned that you're not supposed to park right up where the apron starts anyway. I think it's, 3 feet?
Yeah.
Or something like that, back from where the apron of the driveway is. So
We also had to consider snow, because in a good part of the year, you're going to be putting out your recycling bin when it's snowing, and so we'll adjust to it. We'll give you directions and instructions on how to place it there, and we'll take care of it. As long as we can reach it, we'll be fine. And if we can't reach it, we may have to jump out and do something.
Mm-hmm.
As long as it looks like you've made an effort, we're gonna make an effort.
Well, you mentioned about getting some information out to help people deal with getting it on the snowbank when there's snow and so forth. What we've done is we just take the snow blower and just blow a square to put our garbage out already and our recyclables. So could we not just do the same thing here?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
That'd be easy
Or
enough.
shovel a path if you don't
Yeah,
have a snow blower or something.
Those arms are designed to take care of things. I mean, the operator has a little joystick, and they can move it up, down, sideways, back and forth. So there's a lot of capabilities that has. And all it has to do is get in front of it and just grab its arms around the bin, and we'll take care of the rest.
Much like we see at commercial places with, the waste management trucks or what have you, they come out and these arms come out and they just lift it up and
Right.
take it back into
But
the
we
truck.
we knew that vehicles would be a problem,
Yeah.
so that's why we made sure that it had those capabilities.
Okay.
And we'll learn as we go along, and
Sure,
that'll be something we'll have
sure.
to adjust with.
So if it's not placed on the terrace, it can just be put in the apron.
Sure, put it on your
Okay.
apron, or I
Okay.
think there'll be some putting it by the curb. I think that'll be some instructions too. But obviously, if a car is there, you can't put it out there. But hopefully, when you put your bin out, you'll get out there before the cars do, and people will realize, okay, you're can't park where a cart is.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Okay, I know we've covered a lot here on the single stream recycling. Is there anything that we didn't talk about, Mark, that you think would be important for people to know?
Boy, we talked a little bit about the payments. We will send out. We will give people the ability to, if they really want to prepay, they can prepay. We're not going to necessarily be sending out a bill. We're trying to keep the cost down as much as possible. Sure. But I think we have on the sheet, and we'll be advertising how much it's going to be. And if you want to pay it before it goes on the tax bill, you can come in any time after the delivery, and probably before about November 1st, and pay it. Otherwise, it'll be on your tax bill, one-time charge, and it'll be there and gone, and it'll become part of history.
Part of history, there you go. Okay, well, very fine. Well, let's move on to some other things. We're probably down to about 15 or 20 minutes here. So, Grand Opera House. At the last council meeting, as we're taping this anyway, the last council meeting, it was a very lively discussion. It was a packed council chambers. They were overflowing into the other room, and I think some people were overflowed into the hallway, but very, very lively, but yet polite, respectful, mature discussion.
It was a wonderful civil dialogue on a very important issue, and it was a testament to the people who felt strongly about it, but at the same time didn't need to get vicious about it or anything.
Right.
And the mayor commented at the end. He said, "I'm just so proud of our community, how civil they were, and we had a dialogue on a very important subject." So it was positive. I think that says a lot about the community when an issue like this, which we struggled with. How are we going to pay for this thing? Everybody knew what the right thing to do in terms of the structural fix to the building. That was easy. It was, how are we going to pay for this? And it was a struggle of values, community values, and where we were going to go. But it was great that we had a very civil discussion. There were people that came. It was a minority of people, but they respectfully disagreed with what was being proposed. But they were treated very civilly. There wasn't jeering or booing or anything like that. They were entitled to their opinion. A couple people, I think, clapped for them. I think just because they respected their right to have a dissenting viewpoint, which I think speaks well about our community. And I was very proud of the residents and residents and non-residents who came and spoke, and just the whole process. I was very encouraged.
Well, I was too, and I was surprised, frankly, because it was such an emotional issue. And you know as well as anybody, when there's a lot of high emotions running on an issue, that has the potential to very quickly become a shout fest and get out of hand. And this just simply didn't.
Hopefully this, there have been issues where there's been people at meetings and have jeered and everything, but I think hopefully this can serve as an example of how well the process can work, and we can agree to disagree and still talk to that person and say, hey, how you doing? And that's, I think it's going to serve as a good lesson, because we're going to have other issues down the road that are going to be contentious, controversial, but that doesn't mean we can't conduct ourselves in a civil manner.
Sure. So the work was approved and a contractor was hired. Now, has the work actually begun as we're taping this?
No, not yet. It'll probably start about mid-September to late September. We want to make sure we get all the contracts. Whenever you get a contract approved, you got to make sure all the ducks are in a row, insurance is in place with the contractor and everything. We're taping this on September 3rd. I believe we're going to have a pre-construction meeting the week of September 7th. And so then we'll start the schedule. Our goal is to have it done by about March, so that the Grand can get their programs back into the Grand.
Sure.
The sprinklers are included in this program, so the sprinklers will be done so that the Grand Lounge can get done, which was really the start of this whole thing.
Yeah.
And contract bulk construction out of Appleton, good experienced firm. They have some experience with historical buildings, and we can get that started. We got a little bit of work that was actually excluded from the bid. The State Historical Society is still concerned about the soffit work. We excluded that from the contract, but we're going to separately get that done. When we can reach some agreement with the State Historical Society, we'll get those taken care of. But I'm confident we'll get that done. That won't be a big deal.
Okay. Well, there's, I guess, the next thing about the Grand that's going to be talked about is probably, what to do with it long term, or maybe short term, as the case may be. Whether the city should keep it, whether it should be sold to a private entity, whether it should be some kind of a form of a public-private partnership arrangement. When do you anticipate that those conversations will start?
Well, as a matter of fact, Mayor Esslinger asked that the council have a closed session at the September 8th council meeting to begin that discussion. The reason is coincidentally, we had a 10-year lease, a 5-year lease in 1999 with a 5-year renewal in 2004. So at the end of 2009, the Grand Opera House Foundation's lease with the city expires. So we're actually in the process of beginning negotiations on a new lease. So timing-wise, it's very appropriate to have these types of discussions and see where that goes. And we can have those talks and see where everybody is on the subject. The Grand does rely on some taxpayer support of about $60,000, plus another roughly about $120,000 from the room tax that's used, so about $180,000 in public support on an annual basis. And the Grand Opera House Foundation is responsible for the rest of that. And I believe it's in the neighborhood of a total budget of $850,000. So we fund about about a quarter of it to 20% of it. But the remainder is done through ticket sales, and a large part of it is done through private donations. So we need to have that dialogue about what formula will work best we want the Grand Opera House to succeed, so we have to keep that in mind. It's certainly, I think the discussion has raised the awareness of the community that the Grand Opera House does rely on private donations to fund a lot of its operations, but it also relies on city taxpayers, and so it's going to be a good debate on how we're going to look at that for the future. And times are tough right now, and the Grand, the timing couldn't have been worse for the Grand to be stuck in this situation, because they have staff, many of whom have been laid off for this period of time, and they're struggling to maintain their programs because they don't have a building. So they've been using Alberta Kimball Hall, they've been using Lourdes High School, they've been using other locations. They've even been using the lobby of the Grand, the part of the building that's not closed right now. So they're using every venue they can to get things going. But it's a legitimate discussion to have. The timing for that discussion is very appropriate at this point. So we have about 4 months left in the year, and we'll probably need every day to negotiate whatever the lease may be.
Well, and just Joe Furlow is just such a treasure to that Opera House Foundation and to the Grand itself. He has done such tremendous things, and he has found creative ways to have shows and performances at other venues. He's worked well with others to get that accomplished. He, when this issue first came up and started becoming rather contentious and thinking that it might not pass the council at the last meeting, they worked very hard to find some extra funds privately. And, I just think the man is a real treasure to have.
Joe has worked tirelessly. To be quite honest, the $500,000 that Representative Hentz was able to secure through the state budget was on the local level. Joe did a lot of the work, talking to Gordon, providing him with information so that he was able to, number one, understand the depth of our problem, and also to physically do it. So, Representative Hentz gets a lot of the political credit, and Joe also deserves a lot of the credit for being able to communicate what the problem was and why it was so necessary and appropriate for the Grand. Joe will reel off, it's the oldest operating opera house in the state of Wisconsin, and so many other facts and figures. It's been a pleasure to work with him through a very difficult situation.
Well, and I remember when he first came here, because I interviewed him for something else, just about performing arts centers in general, but his depth of knowledge about the Grand, even when he'd not been here that long, was phenomenal. And it's kind of like, I sort of equate it to like you and Betty Lang from the school district. I mean, you guys came in under some pretty tough conditions and really had to be like human sponges, just absorbing all this information and troubleshooting and dealing with stuff, and so hats off to all of you really for picking up the ball and being able to run with it when you're still getting your feet wet.
One other thing that regarding Joe and how the whole process worked, I think what you saw at last week's meeting was a very good cross section of the community. And I think Joe has worked tirelessly to engage the community in everything leading up to this. I mean, even predating the problems that we structurally had at the Grand, having an annual event where people can come in and vote for different things that they wanted, try to make it as democratic as possible to involve the community in it. And I think the result of that was you have such a level of youth support. And there were all the cute kids that came up. I mean, it was almost,
that was adorable.
It was
and those kids were so articulate.
They were articulate. Well, they're actors. They were doing
a
good
but
job.
Still, they're still kids, and it blew me away to hear some of these kids talk.
And you talk to in the cross section of the community, and everybody who came, after that, you had people, adults who had performed at the Grand, small business people who have benefited from the Grand being downtown, and then just other people who just appreciate the arts, and people who are just either season ticket holders or, hey, I go there once a year for a musical just to get a little culture to offset the football games and everything else you go to. And that cross-section of the community was very impressive, and I think it speaks to Joe's ability to raise the community's awareness of the arts and its importance in a broad-based, well-rounded community and a well-rounded person.
Sure, sure. Our time's quickly running out, but I want to touch on stormwater issues because, when this was an issue last summer, we talked about the West Haven Golf Course as being a possible location and a likely location for a stormwater. Is it detention or retention? I can never get that straight, Mark.
In this case, it's retention. If the water stays in there, if it's always wet, then it's retention.
Okay, all right. So, and then it kind of died down a little bit, that discussion, although that option of West Haven was never off the table. It was never off the table. But the discussion about it died down. And I actually think that some people probably were of the belief that that was no longer an option. But it's always been an option. And now we're starting to hear more about it. When will this be coming for a public hearing?
Well, we after the September 1st work session with the council asked me to schedule some public informational sessions. And what we're going to do is on September 15th, which is a Tuesday, and September 17th, a Thursday, we're going to have public informational sessions. And quasi hearings, but the idea is to get input from the public. We're going to start at 5:30 and give about a half hour as kind of an open house where you can mill around the council chambers. We're going to have charts and pictures and information available so that you can ask. If you're a little shy about asking questions, you can do that. Or if you just want some general information, and do that in a more casual atmosphere. And then about 6 o'clock, then we'll do the more formal, come up and, state your name and tell us what you think. If you have questions, we'll be happy to ask them. If you have comments, we'll be happy to take them. And just give the community an opportunity to be heard on this issue. We're doing it on 2 nights because everybody's busy. And, while it's Tuesday and Thursday, we're hoping that that'll be sufficient to get people out. Then, based on the work session that happened on September 1st and those 2 informational sessions, then council will discuss the various options that are available for them. The West Haven Golf Course is still on the table. The biggest change now is that we've put it together in such a way that the golf course could remain. It'll just have water features that it previously didn't have. A legitimate question came up from the council member saying, well, how would it be operated? Well, that wasn't the scope of the work. The scope of the work was to take a look at all the engineering related to it, but it's a legitimate issue. Before the council can make an informed decision, well, if we're going to buy a golf course, are we going to operate ourselves? How's this going to work? I think last year when it was so controversial, it was talking about replacing the golf course with a private area, a nature area. What we're talking about now is maintaining a golf course. So we can have that discussion, and it may change people's minds. Certainly the June 2008 floods changed a lot of people's mind as well, but we need to have that discussion and recognize the different options that are available. There are options without West Haven. They don't provide as much stormwater capacity. Some people think we should take a look at other options. There's reasons other options are not being considered. But mainly we have a very limited commodity, like we talked about with landfills. Land is a limited commodity. And in an urbanized area, there's only so many places you can put it. So we aren't considering wiping out an entire residential area to put a pond because it's convenient to put it there. We have to take a look at where the opportunities exist. The golf course has indicated, they have some interest, but they just want to know what their fate's going to be, and we owe it to them to put some closure to this issue for them.
Sure. Well, and I know that there was, the possible threat of litigation last time too, and that still may be a possibility. But,
I feel pretty comfortable after talking to our legal staff that isn't as big an issue, but certainly I think it demonstrated that the residents we're willing to fight for what they
sure.
believe in. And we have to recognize that what we want to do is have everybody understand the bigger issue. There are a lot of projects that we presented to the council the other night that have nothing to do with West Haven. They will occur whether we do West Haven or whether we don't do West Haven. And the public needs to be aware that there is a lot more to solving the flooding issues in Sawyer Creek and Campbell Creek and other creeks than West Haven Golf Course. And we need to pursue all of these options so that we address a very important issue. And we don't want another June '08. And
Right.
the only way we can do that is get more of these ponds in.
So again, Mark, those informational sessions are going to be Thursday, the 17th of September, and what was the other date?
Tuesday the 15th.
The 15th, okay. So in 2 weeks, as we're taping this,
Yeah.
that's when they will be held. Okay, very quickly, what can we look forward to in the budget?
Ooh, we'll see. There's a
Or
lot
do
of.
we want to look forward to any of it?
Yeah, you know, last year I came on, and I'd be happy to come back and talk about what the budget's going to mean. But you know, there's a lot of costs that keep getting slipped in that were in the state budget that we weren't even aware of. There's that extra landfill fee. There's other mandates we have with some of our old landfills that are getting slid in there, and it's like, wow, we're going to have to wrap that all in. There was a state law change in collective bargaining that actually works against the employer. It's going to cost. They don't consider economic factors as highly as they used to. To me, we should have been considering economic factors more in this day and age, but they aren't as important as a consideration with an arbitrator. That puts us behind the 8 ball a little bit. At the September 8 council meeting, we're going to have a closed session so we can talk to council about strategy for that. Personnel costs are huge, and we have to figure out how we're going to balance that all out. I can't promise that there won't be any cuts. I suspect there will be. We've tried to set ourselves up so that we can minimize those cuts, but at this point, I can't guarantee anybody that we may be looking at some service reductions. I can tell you with the first subject, and just today we were looking at recycling, that is going to result in significant savings, $200,000 in savings at least, just by going to single stream and automating. So that's a very positive step, and we're looking forward to those changes producing the savings that we've been talking about, and I'm very encouraged by that.
Okay, good. Well, then we will definitely have you back when you start kind of shaping this budget a little bit more.
Sure.
We'll have you back and talk to you then about it. But thanks very much for being here. We
Always
appreciate it.
glad to be here,
Oh,
Cheryl.
it's always a pleasure. Now, just for viewers' information, this show is going to run 2 weeks. I mean, if you're watching it right now, you probably don't need to or want to watch it again, but if you know of someone who is needing some information or whatever, and they maybe didn't catch it, you might want to tell them to tune in for it. But because it is such a serious thing, we are going to run this for 2 weeks to get the information out. So that's going to do it for us. Thanks to Mark, thanks to the crew, and as always, thanks to all of you at home. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.